Welcome to day 2 of Chair Poetry Evenings. We had a wonderful day on the first day. Today also we have 5 amazing poets lined up. So let's begin to hear them.
The first poet of today's evening is Octavio Quintinilla. He is from Texas and the author of the poetry collection If I Go Missing, and served as 18 to 20 Poet Laureates of San Antonio, Texas. His poetry, fiction, translations and photography have appeared or are forthcoming in journals such as Salamander, Rhino, Alaska Quarterly Review, Pilgrimage and many more. His visual poems have been published in Poetry Northwest Borderlands, Texas Poetry Review, Midway Journal, Coldwick Life, Newfound, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now listen to Octavio Quintinilla.
When you die, I'll cover the mirrors with your favorite dress, cover the suicides with the moss of evergreens. Branches in the air mean the trees bear witness. They see it all, the drowned and their journey at the foot of our doors. Have you named the distance that misses you? With my ear on the ground, I hear your prayer. You, about to die in another country. You take a picture of your father with your new cell phone, the last one you take of him, thin and frail, looking like a praying mantis, as he brings his hand to his mouth with a piece of bread. If he pretends to eat, it is to appease your hunger to see him eat, and not to appease the hollow he knows. It's over, and you know it. Hours all you have now, after wasting years in silence, you, in the same path as his, to reach this moment where you hold up your heads like dim lamps and face each other. All light now, as you search in his eyes for anything that doesn't require words. A doorknob, perhaps, that opens the sky before you. This poem is called Party. It's from a new manuscript, or one of the manuscripts that I'm working on. Party. There was a time I had no word for darkness, and so I said darkness. I had no word to say devotion, and so I said 2 sons grieving one mother. A time came when our parents sat under a tree and cried for us, their sons, on their way to a new country. When I tried to return to my boyhood, sometimes I end with my head on my mother's lap. This poem is called Encounter. When this strange bird comes to huddle in the nest of my divorce, I want to touch it first, and then hold it to the light of the language I know. You're a bird, I say. I must be all glimmer to this creature that takes the place of a wife. You've been wrong about everything, the bird says. Yes, I want to say, I've been wrong about everything, but I don't. Gregor Samsa's sister. I too forget her name, your sister's. When I'm in bed and think of her, my wife next to me, reminding me, as she sometimes does, that she never knew her father. What was her name? Hard to remember anything. After I see her ride a train somewhere my life had always wanted to go. It's how your story ends and hers begins. A train and she standing up at one point from her seat, stretching her young body. I imagine by this time it is no longer weighed down by laws. Her body, a symbol, I would argue, of what's left after grief bleeds out. I'm almost sure I misread the whole thing, or maybe I don't remember as much as I think I do. But every time I think of her sister, extending her youth like a rolled up map for all to behold, I wish I could give the woman who sleeps next to me directions to a past where she can find and have the chance to meet the man she grieves for, and then to lie in bed for hours till the rain taps the window with its knuckles, wondering if there's someone in the world I fathered who's unaware of my existence. To discard this quiet like an earring on a stranger's windowsill, to let it be a gift to someone else, but the world rewards so pitifully. You and I are made of the same unhappy dreams, the same quiet that closes and opens all frontiers. Deep at night, when I think of her, your sister, I want to ask my wife to hold me, I want to say, until all my flesh burns off and all that's left is light. This is going to be my last poem. It's going to be a little bit longer, and it comes from a 40-page poem that I've been working on. It's done, and I wrote it in Spanish, so I'm going to read it in Spanish. For all of you who like to read literature in Spanish or like to listen to it. And I'm going to start on page 21, and I'll go for a few minutes on that. Se te muere, se nos muere, el futuro se me queda atrás, así como la casa en la cual crecí. Estoy en el presente que siempre está pasando y mira mis brazos, que no se contentan con lo que abrazan. El mundo no se levanta contra mí, solo tú lo haces. Por eso quiero verme con tus ojos, para saber cómo se vive con una enfermedad que crees que nadie más tiene. Tendido en la cama, con los brazos cruzados, escucho las paladas de tierra caer sobre mí. No me gusta cómo se siente ser olvidado. El futuro regresa lleno de ti y me ofrece una hoja de papel para que escriba 1000 veces que moriré. Y tú seguirás pensando lo peor de mí. Le pido a Dios que me dé tu dolor, la enfermedad que pesa en tu alma como ladrillo, que me dé tus pensamientos oscuros que te llevan de la mano hacia la orilla del río. Ya no tienes palabras para el mundo y el mundo guarda su silencio. Dios mío, bendíceme con el dolor ajeno, regálame el tatuaje canceroso de mi vecina, regálame el miedo de la madre que no tiene papeles, ella que se apaga como el sol tras el horizonte cuando ve una patrulla fronteriza. Dios mío, alégrame el día con la tristeza y la angustia de ese niño que ha sido separado de sus padres. Yo sé cómo se siente y también sé cómo se siente ser separado de un hijo. Señor, bendíceme con la pulmonía crónica de mi madre y con el terror que siente cuando uno de sus hijos sale a la calle. Otros ya te han pedido lo mismo, Señor, y te ordeno que aniquiles lo maldito de este mundo. Así se muere, Señor, así te mueres, Señor. No es súplica, es el deseo de besar la calaca de tu boca. No tengo la fuerza para levantar lo infinito de lo que muere. La tienes tú. Cada 5 minutos me preño de amor. ¿Y a ti? ¿Cuántas veces te han dicho que el amor dura tan poco? Pero para ti no es lo que dura el amor, sino esos 5 minutos que agrega tu vida. Y quieres un poco más de vida, porque has tenido días en que ni la poesía te salva. Días blancos, con manchas negras. Tardes como palomas sin pico. Tardes cuando se te olvida todo y despiertas de repente para darte cuenta que manejas contra el tráfico. Por eso te digo, escribe ahora que llegará el día que no podrás. Lee ahora que llegará el día que tus ojos olvidarán el sonido de las letras. Mira a tu padre, se le olvida cómo tocarte. Míralo, intentando leer un libro. Ese libro que escribió hace años. Ya ni sostenerlo puede. ¿Para qué escribir tu nota suicida? ¿Dónde empezar? Si dices no se culpe a nadie, mientes. Siempre hay culpables. Los poetas que cargan traumas también escriben sobre las muertes que han vivido. Escriben sobre cómo penetran o son penetrados. Escribir la verdad es lo que quieren. La verdad que siempre está a punto de huida. Escribe porque tú también vives con la desgracia. De eso está hecha la poesía, de esa carne podrida, de esas aguas negras, de esas aguas donde las hormigas nadan, donde se estremecen las cabezas decapitadas, donde me derramo para decir que te extraño, igual que mi sombra se derrama por la pared. Le duele la leche que no le sale, lo que no te tragas, la que se desperdicia y florece en las fisuras del aire. Veo la luz de luna reflejada en el agua y me imagino que así es como tus besos permanecen encendidos en mi piel. Encuéntrame otra vez, mi amor, en esa calle donde nuestros años se convirtieron en una sola edad. Encuéntrame otra vez, mi amor, en esa ciudad donde las sílabas de nuestros nombres no son más que pájaros en vuelo y nuestras vidas florecientes se vuelven una sola respiración. Dormiste en mis brazos y yo desperté en la tierra de tu niñez. Thank you.
Gayatri Majumdar is from Pondicherry, India, a beautiful city like poetry itself. She is the founder, editor, publisher of critically acclaimed literary journal, The Brown Critic. Her published and upcoming books include A Song for Bella, a novel, Sun Publishing. Poetry collections Shout, Sampark, I Know You Were Here, Red River, and The Dream Pod, Copper Coin. Brown Critic books published The Lotus of the Heart, non-fiction, and Home Anthology, which she co-edited. Her poems or prose have been published in major Indian and international journals. As co-founder of Pondicherry Poets, she has been curating the annual Pondicherry Orville Poetry Festival, and she features poets, musicians on the Brown Critic Gayatri Majumdar YouTube channel. So dear friends, let's listen to Gayatri Majumdar now.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in Chair Poetry Evenings-Kolkata International Poetry Festival's 2021 edition. It's a great privilege and honor. I'd like to specially thank Sonnet Mondal and the entire team at Chair Literary Trust. Well, let me begin my first poem, Boatman. And I usually don't describe my poems, but just a little bit about this one. It's a poem indirectly about death and my impressions of a city where death is part of everyday life. The poem was written in May this year, following the ravages of the pandemic that we all witnessed. Boatman. Ferry me slow across these pink sandstone architectures of the river's edge, feed this constant fire to the stars. If you're hoping for closure, there will be none. The river is slow but wide. Its shores glistening white for centuries. It stinks of rotting flowers and last rites of beliefs, singeing my body from East Bank to where it's believed the severed head of Brahma fell. But who can tell? I was a fool to think I would come out alive of this. I play hopscotch with the Maharaja of a dream, sunk beneath the waters, pouring milk on his manhood and rage. His mother, a certain queen, dances on a silver pyre, clapping with glee, as she watches young men sway with flames and feathers. The white horse of revelation snatches her away, and the book of the temple remains half-written. The white horse of revelation snatches her away, and the book of the golden temple remains half-written. The river shows with peace in its heart. I lay on the ancient crackling boat, my body floating by the hidden mysteries of these waters, occasionally riding the scalding May wind, crisscrossing Durgas and hungry widows. The Maharaja dismayed utters, "Surely the boatman can wait." Now, can't he? But our boatman is talkative and wears thick-rimmed glasses, and he is never late. The second poem I'll read is called The Hour of God, and it's a Pondicherry-based poem. Rain, hard rain. The elevator is persistent, interspersed with ting-tong. Please close the door. Then in Tamil, Dayavasetu. It as if pleads all night long to no one, startling stars and silverfish. The large drain occasionally gurgles in step with the mind's rhythm. I think my to-do list is too complicated for a night like this, staring at the night lamp with a boy child cradling Mary. The hard rain, relentless, reminds me of a CCR song, or was it Dylan's? What else can rain from the sky? Swaying prayer flags carry me high at this hour when birds will star, childhood's hatch. A motorcycle slit open slippery relationships, leaves green outward scaling the wind. At this, the hour of God. He walks away from his body in quick, brisk steps. I hope to call the next book of my poetry collection Happy Elsewhere, wherein we carry our home, I believe wherever we find ourselves. There's always this craving for going back to childhood and home, but, we can return to home with what is around us and what is within us. So happy elsewhere. It's true. Yes, I missed you. No, not anymore. Lost sparrows narrate forgotten eras of sun hours trickling into melodies and dance, of Roman queens, other crazy patterns fluorescent on a starlit ceiling. They hop, they chirp, they beak, they try as I eavesdrop listening to their conversations, sitting on grandfather's rocking chair in a house haunted by shape-shifters, and at Roman sidewalks selling caldaroste. You promised happiness amidst blowhorns, pipe dreams, and hungry ravens. Now I feel sorry for them. I can still hear Firoza Begum sing on the gramophone of the sky. You and I will then settle for more or less here, with nothing to cleanse, nothing to count on. We'll count berries, instead, do the dishes, haggle the price to watch a grand show of copulating stars, lighting diyas lined across maps of green-edged old parchments. Because wherever I turn tonight, it will rain in constant cricket songs, pitter-patter, towards acoustics, sonic waves on that pathway to that somewhere, misty mountain heads, giggling rivers, that very happy elsewhere. So the last poem is called This Day, and it's more of, I should say, all poems are contemplative and more or less meditative, more of a meditative poem when the day is shaped by a poem and the poem subconsciously turns into a day. This day. The day is becoming a poem, a little light unfettered behind the shadowless sun. The little light dances, at other moments a steady ballerina curating a storm, carrying within its slow death 1,000 petals, many hues, little red books, Darwin's theory, and heady fragrances of spices in a bazaar somewhere in Ernakulam. The day tosses, turns, unable to shake off fables of little or no consequence, Aladdin's lamp, beauties, beasts, and such. Words become the day, working its cleverness around twisted, empty hallways, sepia photos hanging by a string, to make nothing of it, half-truths and silver sleep. The day finally enters into a pact with a poem, falls in love, unable to recall the vows of forevers and undone laundry. The day must die, for coding in its birthing are cries and thunders, remembered rain, wafting the Kadamba breeze, mixing up the saddest of those purples, fuchsias, and creams. Thank you so much for listening. Bye. Take care.
From Lithuania, we have Rimas Uzgiris. He is a poet and a translator whose works have appeared in Paris Review, Barrow Street, Hudson Review, Poetry Review UK, and other journals. He is the author of North of Paradise, Tarp, which was translated into Lithuanian and shortlisted for the Poetry Book of the Year. Uzgiris holds a PhD in philosophy and MFA in creative writing from Rutgers, New York. Recipient of Fulbright Grant, a NEA Translation Fellowship, he teaches at Vilnius University. Let us now listen to Rimas's poems.
Hi, my name is Rimas Uzgiris, or Rimas Uzgiris in Lithuanian. It's a pleasure for me to participate in the Kolkata International Poetry Festival. Even if it is only online, I would love to be there, maybe someday. I'm going to read poems from my book, North of Paradise. I myself am in Lithuania right now, and though I was born in the United States and raised in the United States to parents who were born here, and my children were born here as well, some of my poetry deals with this issue. Between the lines. There was no map for the trip my parents took. Soldiers crossed the continent with flags, changing all the names. You can't step into the same river twice, and yet, Heraclitus, I stepped into that river all the same. From the airplane, endless pines, fields of rape and rye, firs like elders with green beards. I could barely draw breath, the air was so full of meaning, the language hardly known. My mother's uncle met me in a rundown Soviet car. He drove us to where the Neris flows into the Namunas, talking all the way, his words rolling over me like a rill splashing off the rocks of my ignorance. We passed a horse-drawn carriage full of hay. On TV, 3 women in peasant garb sang a dirge. My father was born on the Neris, near where I now live. I don't know where I now live. Vilnius, Vilna, Vilno. People ran like water. In the lecture hall where I teach, our colleagues screened a map of North America, and all I could see was the Mohawk meeting the Hudson in my youth. I could barely draw breath. The air was so full of meaning, This was my home, there, here, now, then, like a hermit crab in the sea, or carried like a louse, Odysseus with no Ithaca. I live in between the lines. Maps cannot contain me. Son of refugees, English is my house. The jacket. The leather jacket hangs between worsted wool and nylon sheen. Its faded, dun hide has been stained and chafed by memory. A bluebird day in Athens, white buildings, a distant shimmering sea, narrow market streets. The balding salesman tells us it's from Germany and proves its worth with fire. And yet the hide fears water. Fickle jacket, tough and sensitive, a woman's man. My ex-wife bought it, a curvy Lithuanian doctor with ebullient charm. Months later, after her absence had grown roots, rain covered Queens again. My career drowned. A blunt Russian colleague, my fellow smoker, philosopher, asked if the jacket is all right. It's all right, I said. Just the ashes of cigarettes, and always the rain. This poem is about Vilnius, although it has to do with memories from the 1990s when I first lived here. Something about Vilnius. The rain pings red ceramic tiles, drains down tin pipes in a capital whose roofs and towers point and sign to a sunken sky. The song does not fit the rose and mustard walls, all things colored against clouds. Verdigris of pine crests the encircling hills, easing the transition to Elysium. Bells and crosses multiplied like rabbits puncture the pagan heavens, spilled, wave perpetually breaking over stone and stucco pastels. Clay and copper cover what they can. The rain wriggles down rusting trolleys and down extinct automobiles, exposed like the insides of matryoshkas, the core of what doesn't go. Concrete cracked apartment complexes litter the flat washed plain like fragments of statues of Stalin. Paunchy men scratch themselves on frayed couches with basketball on the mind. There is vodka, bacon, black bread. The television buzzes. Beehives in the country give honey and cucumbers pickle in the cellar. The old and very young go to garden plots throughout the summer. Others run to Dublin, America, London. As rain fades to an echo from the marshes of Belarus, a hunter shoots a boar. Its flesh is sliced and soaked with onions, vinegar, and yogurt. Nobody knows what to do here either with the dead. Hunt, eat, drink, and love. The break of sun over roofs and hills catches crosses leaning like thieves in refracted light. We fall in together with these fragments and feel home, whether we like it or not. This poem refers to a Marius, that's Marius Burokas, poet and translator. He's translated my work into Lithuanian as I have translated his work into English, and in fact published a selection of his poetry with Parthenon Books in Britain. North of Paradise. The terrace lay empty as Eden, under a prescient autumn cloud. No one risked the gift of rain or early darkness like a shroud. Marius and I tarried outside, smoking our Camel Grays, before ducking inside to hide from a sky so far away from what summer had sung to us all. We huddled then in a concrete den where people whispered as if to a wall. Sipping black coffee, we translated again, turning self into other, yours into mine, being reborn or not in every line. This poem is dedicated to my wife, Monica Furmana. I'm sitting, in fact, in front of one of her paintings, and on the cover of my book is a detail from another painting of hers. The teapot. The teapot waits in the absence of mind, like your paintings in the darkened gallery. Our bodies glow to the pulse of a dream and long for fresh lips to kiss the palimpsest of faded loves lingering like forgotten keys. The teapot pokes the pre-dawn sky casually. You stir to the call of the kettle on the stove. A plethora of voices swirls like steam that burns the skin or settles softly on fingers like snow. There is only the road ahead, the hard wheel and artificial light flickering as if from a screen. Lost moths gravitate to the sequence of scenes that have multiplied into Malthusian imbalance between the singular body and its crib of mirrors. Nobody knows where to go, certain as they are. You bring the teapot, breathing heat, and I give you, in the shadowed loft, my keys. Old coins from a galleon in the Caribbean Sea, a dandelion plucked from the yard, eyes like oceans streaked with clouds, a body like lava, liquid in your arms. Afterbirth. It's 9 a.m., blue sky, December, cold. My son was born this day, at night, in bright star breath, while I, now bleary-eyed, dazed like the drunk I will never be again, drag a razor slowly over the grass on the grave of my face. This poem switches from Brussels to Boston and back again. Different art museums. Reflections from Brussels. I saw Jesus eating with a wooden spoon, a painting bringing him home to the peasants and petty bourgeoisie. I saw Jesus sleeping in his mother's arms, hunched over, a little bit blue, as if he were about to vomit, like my son vomited in the car on the way to the MFA last month. My son who eats from a plastic spoon, my son in my arms, a little blue now that I'm leaving for Brussels to read some poems with others against an always gathering gloom. We fly like angels on a cloud, carried inside welded metal plates full of dreams as light as hot air. Here are some pictures at an exhibition. Here are some pictures on a computer file. They all flit by, fading, depixelating, losing the shine of Michael's shield, Bruegel's angel casting demons into hell. I saw scales of fuming metal cars flee Brussels in the gathering night. Demons or angels they might have been, all hoping to get home, to see their only son or daughter eating milk soup with a wooden spoon. Thank you very much for listening. It was a pleasure to read to you.
Tarek Eltayeb is from Sudan. He is currently teaching at 3 universities in Austria, namely the University of Vienna, University of Graz and the University of Krems. He has published 5 novels, 2 collections of short stories, 5 poetry collections, 1 play in Arabic, 1 autobiography and a collection of essays. His last poetry collection, Not Seen, has been published in Cairo in 2021 and Khartoum in 2021. In Cairo in 2018, his novel Nude I Go Wandering, in Tunis 2021 novel Frivolous Little God. These are all his publications. His books have been published also in German, English, Italian, French, Spanish, Macedonian, Romanian and Serbian translations. His poems have appeared in different languages in various literary anthologies, magazines and journals worldwide. Languages such as Swedish, Chinese, Portuguese, Russian, Ukrainian, Croatian, Bosnian and others. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to his poems tonight.
Hello everyone, everywhere. I am very happy to be with you this afternoon or this evening, even through online. Very glad to be in this festival, and I hope in the future we will meet each other face to face. I will read my poems in Arabic language, in my mother tongue, and I'll begin with the first one. Coffee and water. قهوة وماء. يردد 100 مرة في اليوم: يجب أن أعود، لا صلاح هنا في المكان، هناك الخير والمحبة ويسكت. أسأله أين هذه الهناك، يشير بيده في أي اتجاه، وتضيع من وجهه الملامح، يصمت. أمسك بيده ونجلس في المقهى على مائدة في زاوية هادئة، أطلب له قهوة ولي ماء. أحدثه بالعربية وأخلط القهوة بماء، ينزعج: هل جننت؟ يحاول أن يعيد الماء من القهوة، يحاول أن يعيد الماء إلى الماء. Next poem. The Bull. الثور. لم يخر الثور من حد سكين المعبد موعد تصعيد القربان، ولا من رشق رماح في الساحة، ولا من لمعة نصل التهديد، ولا من نزق وعيد وضجيج، ولا من حشرجة المذبوحين، ولا من خسوف قمر قبل ليلة، ولا من خسوف قمر قبل ليلة موعد تنزيل الغفران، ولا من مساعير كلاب، ولا من. خر الثور لأنه نسي أن الآلهة في آخرة العبادة تذبح ثم تؤكل. بلاك. أسود. عبرت النهر وحين وصلت للضفة الأخرى كنت أسود. قلت لرفيقي على الضفة: الماء رائع، اسبح. خاف من لوني، صمت. صحت فيه أن يعبر، كان يهذي والريح تنقل نصف الكلام، وكنت أصيح له أن يقترب. خاف رفيقي من لوني حتى لم يعد يسمعني، ونسي تاريخنا القديم. كل عام أذهب إلى الضفة وأنادي وسط الخلق، أكاد في لحظة ضعف أن أعود إليه، لكني أخشى أن أفقد أصل لوني وأفقد بقية حواسي. Toothless Sea. بحر بلا أسنان. ما زال يرضع من الشمس ليلا ومن القمر نهارا، بحر بلا أسنان. حين يبكي يجف فيقدد الأسماك بثورا، ويجعل من الحيتان أمشاطا في الرمال. بحر كلما تقدم في السن تنازل عن الشمس والقمر وصادق الريح. عشق مغامرات القراصنة والمستكشفين الجواسيس. يقهقه راميا برا ويشهق بالعا جزيرة، لكنه في نهاية الدرب يغوص في الأزرق جاهلا الفرق بين البحر والسماء، فيخف ويجف ويموت بحرا بلا أسنان. Poverty's Terror. الفقر رهبة لهم. أعطوه فأسا وزرعوه وسط مزارعات إفريقيات، صوروه كأنه رب الحصاد، كان يضحك وهو لا يعرف معنى النخلة. حمل طفلا رثا ليتصور معه دون أن يتصور حاله. بدا مثل بار بالمعدمين كإله رحمن رحيم. صاروا ينقلونه من فقر إلى فقر وهو سعيد باللعبة التي ستنتهي به إلى هناك إلى شماله في النعيم، حيث سيكون الفارق رهيبا والفقر الذي لم يدركه بعد أكثر رهبة. Joseph's Phrases. آثار يوسف.
I'm going to read a poem by Tarek Eltayeb, translated into English. Poverty's Terror. They gave him a hoe, planting him among African women farmers, portraying him as if he were a harvest deity. He smiled, having no idea what a palm tree was. He held a child in rags in his arms and wanted to take its picture, not knowing anything about the child's situation. He seemed to be kind to the poor, like some compassionate, merciful God. He was taken from one poverty to the next, being content with this game that finally took him back north into the pleasant, where the difference was cruel, where the poverty that had not yet arrived would be much more cruel.
From London, we have S.J. Fowler. He is a writer, poet, artist. He has published 9 collections of poetry. His works have been commissioned by Tate Modern, BBC Radio 3, South Bank Centre, amongst others. He has been translated into 27 languages and produced collaborations with more than 150 artists. He is the director of Writers Kingston and European Poetry Festival. Let us listen to the final poet of today's evening, S.J. Fowler.
Hello friends, I wish so sincerely that I could be in Kolkata celebrating with you the Chair Poetry Evenings. It was one of the joys of my life as a strange and relatively obscure experimental poet here in the UK, that I got to travel to different festivals and meet different people over the last decade or so, and that has been taken from us over the last few years. But this is a beautiful stand-in for that until I'm able to come to Kolkata and we were able to meet. I'm very grateful for the invitation to be part of the Chair Poetry Evenings and celebrate the international nature of your festival in Kolkata. And one day I hope to be there in person. I would love that very, very much. Thank you to Sonnet and all the wonderful staff at Chair. It's wonderful to be in the company of so many brilliant poets who have been part of the festival over the years. So my work is known perhaps for being relatively innovative and experimental. I don't know if it's actually original and innovative, but the methodologies of it is. So a lot of my work is literary, shall we say, in the experimental tradition, but I also do a lot of work with collaboration, visual poetry, handwriting art, sound poetry, performance, and I curate a lot of events in the UK, especially around the idea of collaboration and also neurological understandings of language. So my poetry often is not known for being literary or text-based, though I have published 9 books of poetry in that regard, and that's what I want to share with you today. I published a book at the start of 2020 called I Will Show You the Life of the Mind on prescription drugs. And the book is a conceptual narrative, a choose-your-own-adventure book, which features many variants of text-based poems, from found text and illustrative text to just written poems in a certain tradition that I would trace back to European and British 20th century modernism. So I'm going to read with you part of a sequence that features in that book and then is continued in another book that I released this year, but I will start. It is called Side Effects of Lofopramine or Reboxetine, otherwise known as Jacob's Ladder, and it has 3 epigraphs by Meister Eckhart, the German Christian mystic. There exists only the instant present. It is a now which always and without end is itself new. There is no yesterday nor any tomorrow, but only now, as it was 1,000 years ago and as it will be 1,000 years hence. The first rung. My heart is in this, not here. My heart is not in painless things, burning wings, burning red, where Jacob stopped to stalk, watching videos of my heart is not in this, while it is. And so mounting, as it were, by step to us, to get upwards motion by a ladder, for your cheeks are flushed and pink, and so you are higher than me, because we came to the place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set, and if you looked to the ladder, you saw clouds. The second rung. Dear worry, dear, introducing us to the pain of ending, and my introductions to myself in road, dear 9 times keeping me company, an inch from a rose bush, astride to a poppy, my heart in that, resting behind you, upon you. A human being has so many skins inside, covering the depths of the heart and taking us as one of the stones of the place. We put it under our heads and lay down in that place to sleep. And we dreamed that there was a ladder set up because of the earth, and we know so many things, but we don't know why. 30 or 40 skins or hides, as thick and hard as a bear's, cover the soul. The third rung. Knowing the scowl, alighting the use, the care for softening, though my clothes are not black any longer, as blue as the black ladder lung just rusted on the leaving day, as the third rung, an inch from a rosebush, a bubble, a step from colour, a flower as food that could have killed me. So I give thanks by promising I shall not make money from bloodshed. In that I choose my heart, in that it has been saved. I smell hell beneath my feet. The fourth rung. A red book of sermons that writes, these people are my flock, just making their way. The knower is I, and the known are they. The knower and the known are one. While the eye in which I see you is the eye in which you see me. And here in the garden, simple people imagine that they should see us. And if we stood there and they here, but into our own ground, learning to know less there, the ladder is placed and is firm, and seems to me to signify in a riddle by our vision the gradual ascent by means of virtue, by which it is possible for us to ascend, not using material steps, but other kinds of climbing. The fifth rung. Above us, beneath the ladder, are birds flying to have enemies that disagree. We have a care to know nothing, but our backs, they are both arched, the neck is up, with our faces, for we climb. And into this I do know colours by this plant. You are red. Your cheeks are flushed to stare too long. Almost never at its hand, almost a return. Almost I can smell what is above and not below, but this leaves me upside down, kissing. So the sequence, which featured in this book from 2020, published by Dostoevsky Wannabe Press, was inspired by biblical language and found text from Meister Eckhart, but also then turned in response to a film called Jacob's Ladder, which was about a man who had been in the Vietnam War, who was trapped in a kind of purgatory because he can't let go of life. And these things mixed together. I'm interested in how biblical language or religious sounding language is so removed from Western culture, especially in poetry, even though it is the firmament, the basis of so much of what we understand with language, and especially poetic language. So I fused my own writing with the writing of Eckhart and other texts and this film to create a mix, to create a certain tone with certain imagery. And in fact, these 9 poems I see as love poems. They are love poems. I published the last 4 poems of this sequence. The first 5 were in I Will Show You the Life of the Mind on prescription drugs in 2020. And the last 4 were published in a book I released this year in 2021 called Come and See the Songs of Strange Days, Poems on Films. And it was one of the concluding poems of this book, which was released by Broken Sleep Books this year. If you're interested, my website, stephenjfowler.com, has links to both these books in the poetry collection section. And now I will read the last 4 poems from this sequence. From I Will Come and See the Songs of Strange Days from Broken Sleep. The 6th rung. Almost I remembered, almost I saw the ladder, for I see it still, eyes closed, picturing it as I hold it. It is made of 12 steps, and on each step there are 2 human forms. One holds each side of the step visible as far as their breasts clinging. One sees to the top that there is a face as of a woman carved in fire, much more than terrifying, loving, more than the 24 others, for she is over this central face, though I see the eyes rarely crying. The 7th rung. I am definitely in the hour without climbing or clutching yet, hands coming for me to drag me down to that which is alone, not gutting, not torture, not sorrow. No purgatory of the cut off, a middle place made by absence, without invasions, humiliations, for there I take in, seeing the smile as the eyes cry upon the ladder, for it is wet. The ladder as the age made of chemists, the 12 steps as periods in which we take in, by contemplation, each other. So pause out in knowing what is epigraphic and worth reading is remembering and eating. And leaving the earth, resting on lower rungs, I find myself resistible. The 8th rung. I find myself an altitude, facing down the red water, trouble followed, without strength of indifference, like a city beyond London, I cannot take nor leave. And I climb like dying, feel the rung that is maybe release or division. The devils are tearing my life away as I exercise, eat well, abstain. I am sure to die. Anyway, sick, refusing what we are and were the opposite of the end. The 9th and final rung. This has been a ladder down, not up, for colours, for fire make no difference. This will burn memories like chemotherapy of the soul, just chemical to physical being on that black ladder, and able to find a day when I am strong enough to go. I shall melt into beds like gulfs possessed by readings familiar with our fear first time in last moment. Familiar with the experience of conversion, too tall for the ladder and to speak of it, saving embarrassment from my friends whom I no longer recognize, but see as the mangled, whose love I climbed upon, pulling their hair, trapping them under chairs, to hold their face in my palms for my submission into pleasure, for my heartlessness has hardened into a future, where each hand on the rung is lifted to be denied and laid upon the roof of a secret house 2 lives back. Thank you so much for the opportunity to read these poems to you. And thank you so much for having me as part of this wonderful festival. And I hope in the future, all of you watching, if you are in Kolkata, we will meet in person. Thanks again.